right, so here is a list of the questions that I ask myself when preparing for a trade in the morning. Um, there's still a work in progress, and they're obviously a little bit more tiered towards me than any other trader. But I think there's a lot of like general rules of thumb in these questions that are good, that could be good for all traders. And probably traders already automatically ask themselves these questions. But for me, the morning is always tricky because I always feel like it takes me a while to warm up and get going in the morning and throughout the day. But I've noticed that by getting up in the morning, and then once I start to wake up a little bit, I quickly start asking myself these questions. And when I do that, it seems like it gets me to really think about the setups more like I would later in the day. Because it always seems like later in the day I can look at things in hindsight and understand them. Well, I think the goal for all of us is, the next step after seeing things in hindsight and being able to understand it and explain it is being able to see it ahead of time, right? Or see it develop. And so I think these questions are really triggering my mind to see them develop more now or see them ahead of time. And obviously, they're not always correct. And, we have to be patient and see if it even sets up like we think it could, or we might have setups for multiple directions, stuff like that. But just trying to brainstorm and come up with ideas, like legitimate setup ideas ahead of time, can set us up for like huge trades, especially if we're correct for a lot of it. But like I said, we might not be, and that's okay. And you can't be too biased, or you can't be too stubborn on the setup either. So here are the questions. I first, put the date, and then I go over like the spies and the sectors and stuff, and I put in the levels for those things. And then I go to pre-market scan and plans, and then I type in the stock. And so basically, when I'm going through all of these questions, I should be able to give an answer pretty quickly, whether it's through just answering it right away or by looking at the chart. And if I'm not able to answer the question within like 30 seconds, then it's probably not going to be a good answer, right? So if I'm looking for a really good level and I'm sitting there looking at all the time frames and I'm really struggling to find a level, that's probably a sign that there's not a whatever specific level I'm looking for there, it's not there. So that's one way that this thing works, because it, sometimes we get so stuck on trying to make an idea work or make a setup work. Well, these questions help to tell me if I'm being too biased or if I'm making something out of nothing. So let's see here. So yeah, and another thing is like, yeah, it seems like a lot of questions here, but it's really not supposed to make things more complicated. Like I know if the stock and the price has to follow, 10 different variables and align all of them together, it's putting it too much in a box, and then we're not going to be able to trade. That's not what this is doing. This is just asking me the questions that I should already be asking myself in the routine or as a habit before entering any trade. This is telling me what the story is of the stock. Okay, so the first one would be the type of. So I pick the stock, and then the catalyst or the technical, right? It's either earnings, it's either gapping because of earnings, or it's gapping because of news, or something happened, or something's going to potentially happen on a technical basis. So then I just put that in there. And the next one is type of gap. I really like this one because it's telling me who won the battle on the previous day, right? So So for example, like AMD here, so we had 3 days in a row of green days. This was technically a green day, and then it gaps way up here. Well, that is called a gap and retest, because since this was a green day, and especially all 3 of these days combined was a lot of buying, you're going to have some kind of profit taking, or at least the potential for it. And so you'll look for some kind of selling within this day. So it's called a gap and retest, as opposed to a gap and go, which would be the opposite. Is like if the buyer, if all these guys bought here and then price opens down here, then all of these guys are trapped, and the buying immediately becomes selling, and you might have what's called a gap and go, where it's just like a more faster emotional continue sell down. Then I ask myself, well, what's the direction of the trend? So in this case, AMD, even though it's been super strong for, I don't know, the last few years, it's clearly in a downtrend here. And until it continues to make new highs or gets over resistance points, it's considered in a downtrend still, in my mind. And so that tells me that there's more momentum to the downside still for right now. And then I ask myself, is it a first day play, or is it a second, third, fourth day play, etc.? Because both are different. Like a first day play is quite different than a second day play. The first day play, you can't use a lot of those fresh levels, especially if there's a big gap. And so you'll have to look left and see on the higher time frame if there are higher time frame levels that are important. So like in this case for AMD, price was about to open way up here. Well, it had been way down here for a while. So there wasn't anything fresh until you got to a few weeks back. And so then I would ask, okay, these higher time frame levels, are they super clean and clear? And a lot of times if they're not, if I can't find them right away, then I won't put a lot of weight on them, and then that first day play might be difficult. However, if it was a really good level, like let's just say this $130 right here, which was a good bounce here, was a really good higher time frame level, well then I'll put that into account into my first day play. And then a second day play, Ford was a really good example. We all kind of traded this for a while a few weeks ago when it had that breakout, right? And this was the first day. And you can see that these were since it was an all-time high, I think these were the only levels you could use. And so second day play, you could use those fresh levels. And then I ask myself, did it set value? This helps force me to look at where price has been cycling around, which we know will work like gravity and pull it back in, right? Like if we're clearly in a daily range, we know that price wants to stay in that range unless new volume comes in. But for day one plays, we don't really have value, right? Because it's probably gapped somewhere else. So we're going to struggle to know exactly where the value is for a day one. However, for day two, that's where we would look at, the normal questions that we ask, like, did it continue into the highs? Is it still in search of value, or did it almost turn around and create like a nice range gravity here, like it did here? And that way, if it tries to get away, if it doesn't, it's pulling back in. And then does a higher time frame level jump out at you? So does a higher time frame level jump out at you? And then the next one, can you tell who is trapped on multiple time frames? So this piton the other day was a good example. This was the daily. It was in a downtrend. This was day one. We had a ton of selling volume here. And then price was about to open right here. Well, to me, when I asked myself, does a higher time frame level jump out at me? It absolutely did. The low of this day and the high of this day as well as boom over here, the high of this day, because we also had another high selling day. So 2 selling days all aligning up with that level right there made that a higher time frame 10 out of 10 level for me. And then the next question, who was trapped on multiple time frames? Well, on this day, if price gets above this level, all of these shorts are trapped, all of these sellers are trapped, as well as whoever sold in here and in here. And you can see here, even price held this level here, so we had a new range here. So this to me was a 10 out of 10 level, and I knew exactly who would be trapped. Actually this trade and this setup a couple days ago was what made me really get serious about setting up this pre-market plan, because this was my plan that morning. And if you can see up here, I wrote, and this was in the pre-market, I wrote pre-ton overall downtrend. However, a lot of volume lining up at the 3250-ish area, which was that level here, 3220 area. Using that as an inflection, if price gets above, it could be a bigger long due to all the sellers being trapped from yesterday. It could then travel to 37 or 40. And so I thought that if it did get above that, you'd have a lot of energy to get to the high here at 37. And then if you got above there, it would also trap all of these people, and then it could go up to, and I just chose the whole $1.40. And it literally did both of those things. And it did it so quickly at the open. You know, we always hope that we get in trades that work for us right away, and this trade would have worked right away. And so it really bugged me that not only did I pick the levels and pick the idea, but it made sense to me. And so the fact that I wasn't able to be convicted with it wasn't like an alarming red flag. And I'm like, you know what? I think I just was not warmed up and prepared in the morning. And had I gone through all these questions and prepared like this, I could have probably made this my best trade ever. Okay, so let's move on here. So the next question is, so then I asked myself, what are all the potential setups? This one is tricky, right? We have all of our names for our setups, and there's always different variations of them. So I guess I just type in here all the different setups, like range resistance, you know, isolated daily isolated pivot, etc. And then I ask myself, can I visualize the setup? This is a big one for me, because a lot of times I'll answer some of these questions in the morning, but I really won't truly visualize it. And visualizing it helps me, it honestly helps me calm down. It just helps me calm down, because if I tell myself, hey, I want price to, and we could just look at like this Ford, for example, you know, I want price to, at the open, sell down to this 2350 level down here, and if it gets down there and holds, I want to get long. And just the act of actually visualizing that and then coming up with targets up above helps me sort of to be more patient. And then also, you know, the stock is selling off, and a lot of times I'll get bearish on it just because it's selling off. But if I have a plan and I know, hey, this was the last level that I believe in before it'll fall from there, then I'll be more convicted and wait. And then I'll also ask myself, where is my ideal entry price for each setup? Like a lot of times there's multiple supports, right? And there's different levels, but there's always that like favorite level. So I'll write down the different prices, but I'll write down my favorite price. And again, that just is another way to make me more patient. And it also gives us permission to miss the trade if it doesn't go to our ideal price. So say it sells down, but it only sells down half the distance and then turns around and starts going up. Well, you know, it is what it is. It didn't come down to our price. Had we gotten in here, we would have had such a wide stop that might have broken some rules or just made us uncomfortable, right? I actually really like this question. What scenario would make you not like the setup? I think again, this one has us come up with ideas on what we wouldn't like, and then would also give us the permission to let the trade go if it does one of those things. Um, I think over time, if we're able to answer this question more to our setups, it'll just show how fine tuned we are with the setup, and how it needs to work in certain specific ways for us. Otherwise, there'll be red flags and we just won't get in it. So, um, almost like an anti play or red flags, something like that. Like an example of what scenario would make you not like the setup would be if like a key support breaks, you get in, but then it starts to break, and then you look at SPY, and SPY has breaking news and is breaking a level. Well, then you could get out of forward. Then, like that's maybe a scenario you would not like. I don't know, or maybe that's a scenario that sets up before you enter, so then you just wouldn't enter until SPY finishes selling off or something. And then another question: how closely does the stock usually follow the SPY or Q? I don't know about that one. What are the absolute best support and resistance levels in the SPY or the Qs? So just in case the SPY or in the Qs, especially if the VIX is up, right? If the VIX isn't up, it won't be as big of a deal, because the SPY is normally just moving small amounts every day, or it's just going up, right? So it won't. But if the VIX is up and we're trading a different stock other than a market stock, well, then we want to know where that key support and resistance level is on the SPY. That way, as long as the SPY doesn't break those, we know that maybe the stock won't be as impacted. And then I really like this one: grade your pre-market setup and plan. So this is a question that, again, it's like, after answering all of these questions, I could be starting to convince myself that I have a good setup just because I've answered all these questions. I have answers for them all. Surely this is a great plan because I've came up with answers, blah, blah, blah. But really, we could come up with all kinds of shit all day long. Different variables, different levels, it's endless, right? We could convince ourselves of that stuff. And so I think this question kind of snaps you back out of it again and makes you be aware of, hey, is this all of these things? Have you been, honest, and like, are these like good technical answers and stuff? And what's the grade of this whole setup and plan? And by giving a grade, that helps tell me, well, if it's a C or if it's a low grade, well, then maybe I won't even watch it then. It's almost a reason to just weed away the stock, because honestly, we want to focus more on less, right? We don't want to over focus and be over biased or over impatient. But if we have a really good setup and we're patient with it and we understand it and it's taking a while to set up, but it's still working, we want to just focus on that one. So why not just focus on the setup and plan that we say we have an A in? Like if I said this is an A, well, then I might end up pushing away all the B setups and below and just sticking with the A, and then sticking with it as long as it's working throughout the day. And then I like this question too: how much do I plan on risking? I think this is important, right? Because if I'm saying this is an A setup, I'm probably going to want to risk more. So I'll probably put like 1R or more or whatever. But if this is like a lower level plan, I'd be like, you know what? I do like this plan, but there's a couple things that really need to work for it to work. And it also might not. There's a couple of variables that are a little bit of alarming to me. So maybe we'll put, half an R risk, or even a quarter of a risk or something. And I think this is just another way for us to become aware and not get too stubborn with our plans, and tells us if, how good of quality the setup is. Do I need to set alerts? Yeah, sometimes, we just need to set alerts because maybe price is not opening anywhere close to our best level, right? But sometimes price gets all the way up to that level, but we just don't know. And like, we're almost like surprised. We look at it later and we're like, holy crap, price came all the way up to that level. either it does it at the open or maybe it does it way later. Maybe there's breaking news in the market and things move so much, and meanwhile your favorite setup, your stock that had an awesome setup, but just price was so far away from it, maybe it made it all the way to that level, and these alert systems can let us know. So I think alerts are definitely underutilized, but again, you just have to use them with a grain of salt, like everything. Like it's got to be in combination. Okay, are you going to set a limit order ahead of time? Sometimes when I'm waiting for the stock to sell down into support or buy up into the resistance, I don't necessarily want to just click market order and get right in, right? Because it seems like it's a little chasey. And so sometimes I'll set a limit order ahead of time. And so yeah. And then do I have the ATR set? Obviously, we know ATR is important. It's not the amazing variable or anything, but it's always a great rule of thumb, or just a great average to know, like how much potential the move has, and then how much it's already gone. It's something we should always memorize for whatever stock we're about to enter. We should always know the ATR and just understand the full range of it. And then the strength of targets. I've been really liking this too. Like if I really like the targets as well, like if I not only really like the entry idea, but I also love the targets, because the targets also have really high time frame levels connected with them. That makes this overall plan even stronger. I think the better targets that we have that we understand, the better the A+ setup as well. But a lot of times we get into a trade and we might love the entry, but we have no idea of the targets. And so we just start making up shit. And I just think that having good targets is a good idea. Now, obviously, we might be wrong on the targets and it might not even get there. So we can't always rely fully on it making to the targets. But I think it just, when the targets are easily screaming at me on the chart, as well as all of the other good variables, that just tells me that this might be a really good moving stock today, is what that tells me. So that's pretty much everything. Let me know if you guys have any more to add or take away. And again, like, I don't want to like ask myself a million questions in the morning and like overbog myself down and put myself in too tight of a box to where I can't trade anything. Like this, I feel like I just want to ask myself questions that I understand, and that I feel like a lot of traders probably do ask themselves, or they by habit already look at a chart and think of all these things. These are just like rules of thumb, and you're basically just going through all the time frames and putting together a picture of what the story is. And I think these questions start to tell me that, and then I also am able to then think ahead. And the thinking ahead has been an issue for me in the morning when I'm still kind of sleepy or whatever. So it's been working really well. So thanks, guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye.